Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, and my co-host is Justin Baker, and we are jumping right in, continuing our series on the top 10 players for every franchise across the National Hockey League. And today we're on the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Minnesota Wild. We'll start with the Penguins, and of course, we'll roll on into the Minnesota Wild, the team that has not been around for nearly as long. And if you're thinking maybe we'd include some past Minnesota team players, no, we're going to lump the North Stars in with the Dallas Stars. But if you want to go check out the previous teams that we've done at this point, we've done, I think, 8 other teams, right?
Yep.
So I'm not going to list off all the teams because that's like a third of the team, fourth of the teams in the league. But go back, check our old episodes. They should be the last 4 in the list, and you can listen to those. We've got the Red Wings and the Blackhawks and the Bruins.
We never did the Blackhawks, but
we didn't do the
No.
Blackhawks. Oh, we did. For some reason I'm thinking Chris Chelios. I know we did.
We
Chris
talked
Chelios,
about him, yeah.
but he's a part of the Red Wings. All right, well, let's dive right into the Pittsburgh Penguins, and just as a refresher, as we do these lists, they just have to have played one season for that team in order to be considered for the list. So Minnesota Wild, maybe more likely for a guy with fewer games played to be a part of the list. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they've had a couple good players over the years, so maybe a little less likely. So with that said, Justin, any just missed that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I would love to share them with you, Mark. Thank you. And our listeners. For me, a couple guys, no goaltenders this time on my just missed. They actually made my list. So,
that means Ken Reggett is on your list?
Dude, he might be top 5.
What's that? He's on your just missed.
Yeah, no, not even that.
He's
not on any list. Phil Kessel, Kevin Stevens, and Mark Recchi were 3 guys that made my just missed.
Okay. Yep. None of those guys made my list either, and I kept Rick Kehoe off the list, despite being a good player for the Penguins from their existence, essentially.
Pretty much.
That team is just not good. So
no, they weren't good.
I didn't. Although I will give him this little nod. In 722 games, playing in the 70s and the 80s, he had 88 penalty minutes in 722 games. That
guys had that many in one season.
Phenomenal. I mean, Mario Lemieux over the course of his career, 915 games. You don't think of him as, it's not like he was a fighter or anything. 834 penalty minutes. I mean, he almost had a penalty minute every game. So that's a penalty every other game. Whereas this guy, Rick Kehoe had maybe a penalty every 15 games,
if that.
That's impressive for anybody. So just thought I'd give him the little tip of the cap for that. And I also have Joe Mullen on my just missed list.
Ooh, yeah. Forgot about him sometimes.
There's a lot of good Pittsburgh Penguins players, and you're looking at it, and you're like, well, Joe Mullen, he played 379 games as a Penguin. Martin Straka, he didn't make my list. He played 560 games for the Penguins. There's just been a couple fantastic teams that have played for, the Penguins have had great teams at certain points. So it's hard to ignore those teams in comparison to an early 2000s Penguins team where, maybe Martin Straka would definitely be on the Minnesota Wild's list if he had played for them and done what he did, 442 points in 560 games. But he doesn't make that list because, there's too many guys ahead of him.
Too many guys.
All right, well, with that said, you were number 10.
Yeah, number 10, guy made your just missed, Rick Kehoe. And it's more or less, he played on some terrible Penguin teams that didn't really have a lot of success. But he is up there in terms of points for this franchise, number 5 all time. And I think being on a crappy team and still, I shouldn't say crappy team, but being on some pretty below average teams there in the early 70s, and still the longevity, the production he still had, and then of course love the penalty minute fact too. That's a great little tidbit. But yeah, so 11 years with Pittsburgh, and he makes my list.
Okay. My one guy, he played a few less games than some of these guys, but I think he was, outside of Jaromir Jagr, the best player on the Pittsburgh Penguins in the early 2000s when he was there, and was a really underrated player throughout his career. almost averaged a point per game, and that's Alexei Kovalev.
Ooh, yeah, I thought about him too, but
now less points and less games than Martin Straka, and they actually, like, at times they played together. Same with like Robert Lang. I think they were all kind of there at the same time. I just feel like Alexei Kovalev was the best player that was there. And when Jágr left, when he went to the Rangers, I was trying to remember exactly when Alexei Kovalev played for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It was in the late 90s into the early 2000s. So yeah, Jágr was still there. He put up a 95-point season, but always was scoring big goals for the Penguins. Not necessarily a time when they were winning tons of games, and he did come back for one last hurrah, 20 games in 2010-11. But he also, for the Penguins, he had some good playoffs too. I mean, he had in 98-99, he had 12 points in 10 games. In 2000-2001, he had 10 points. So some decent playoffs for them. And so Alexei Kovalev, my number 10. Who's your number 9?
Number 9, probably one of the better defensemen of all time, at least one of the highest scoring defensemen of all time, Paul Coffey.
Okay.
Yeah, a guy who, ultimately won championship with the Penguins and then got traded to L.A. in the middle of the second run, which kind of sucks. I mean, if you really think about it, like it's hard enough to trade away a guy of his caliber, let alone like
he went to play with Gretzky, right?
Right, he did. But I mean, you're getting off a Stanley Cup championship.
I mean, what a life. You're playing with Gretzky, and then you go and you play with Lemieux, and you're like, I want to play with Gretzky.
Right.
You go play with Gretzky, and you go, I want to play with Yzerman, and you go play with Yzerman.
Right, and bat the puck in the net. Still hate that, but yeah. So, anyways, Paul Coffey, we know how good this guy really is, and the offensive totals speak for themselves. So for me, he comes in at number 9.
Yeah, higher on my list. So we'll see him in a minute. My number 9 is actually one guy that surprised me that I was putting him on this list.
Okay,
it's Chris Kunitz.
Really?
Yes.
I'm actually really surprised. I mean, I looked at him, but I'm like, you know what? He was never really the offensive dynamo where a lot of these guys on the list are.
I feel like because of his impact to Sidney Crosby, he was at one point, he was like the only guy who could play with Crosby.
That's very true.
It was Chris Kunitz and Sidney Crosby plus a third wheel.
They still can't find anybody to play with Crosby, really.
Yeah,
who has the IQ and the speed to keep up with him.
Yeah.
I mean, Kunitz was never fast. But.
Well, and the reason is because you have, I think, you think of course, the superstars, and really, I mean, Sidney Crosby was the best player in the game. I mean, for some people, he might still say he's the best all-around player in the game. We'll put him up there. He's definitely in the top 5 to 10, somewhere in there, if not top 3. So
currently,
oh,
absolutely,
I mean, he still hasn't fought. Yeah, he's still unbelievable, but he is the greatest grinder of all time. That is, I've always stood on that Sidney Crosby is not like. He's not like Connor McDavid, where he's just crazy fast and can just blow by guys, and he can. His skating is what is allowing him to do it. He's a great skater. He's also great. He can shoot. He can pass. But I don't think that he is necessarily the absolute best at one of those things. Like, let's go Alexander Ovechkin. He is the best shooter in the National Hockey League. Like, he's the best goal scorer in the league. Sidney Crosby, not the best goal scorer. Is he the best passer? No. Is he what is he? He's just always in the right place at the right time. And I remember early on in his career, a lot of Red Wings fans being from Detroit, and they hated Sidney Crosby. They're like, the guy's so lucky. Like, oh, he's so lucky. No, he's not lucky. He literally just knows where to be all the time. So an unbelievable down low player. And normally with a superstar, you need a player who is equally as fast or equally as skilled to be able to do it. But Sidney Crosby, he worked hard down low. His lower body's so freaking strong that he needed another guy who was also really strong and had good hands. And that's why Chris Kunitz worked so well. Same with Bill Guerin, actually. Bill Guerin worked really well with Sidney Crosby.
For a short period.
He had a really good shot, and he was willing to go into the corners.
Wow, okay.
So Chris Kunitz, to me, is I think without Chris Kunitz, I wonder if Pittsburgh maybe has one less Stanley Cup.
I believe it. I think he was very key in those runs
at least
for
that
sure.
2009 team.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not going to say that he necessarily tipped the scales so far in 2016 or 17, but definitely that 2019.
No, but you need those guys. I mean, you look at the clear example for me is always Edmonton, right? I look at those guys. They've got their Sidney Crosby and Malkin there with Draisaitl and McDavid, but unless you have that Kunitz guy there on the wing, you can't succeed.
Doesn't work. Yep.
So,
and they tried to put Milan Lucic with him.
Didn't pan out.
Okay, you're number 8.
On number 8, Tom Barrasso.
Okay.
And I struggled with this one, I'll be honest with you.
He missed my list.
Yeah. I struggled with this one a little bit because statistically, it doesn't look very good. I mean, he averaged more than 3 goals against, during the regular season, but being number 2 all-time wins, he had, the cups to his names, and he had a lot of success. Now, maybe that has a lot to do with the team in front of him, but still in the playoffs, his numbers weren't really that bad compared to regular season. So, for me, I couldn't justify putting him any higher, but I think the longevity and the success he had in the net where they were confident to keep him there for so long and never really make a change, even though the numbers maybe weren't as great in the regular season, speaks to just what this team thought about him. So for me, number 8.
Let's talk about, so he does have a Vezina Trophy, not with the Penguins.
No.
He has it with the Buffalo Sabres. He won it in his rookie season. He only played 42 games, and his save percentage is .893.
Yeah, for a Calder, an All-Star, and a Vezina.
It's weird to think that goalies were that bad, folks.
That was a whole nother era where guys in the 80s just took off scoring, and I think goaltenders just really couldn't adjust in the stand-up position, right? Because that's what goalies used to do. Now we have, we either have your straight butterfly or you're doing a hybrid style of goaltending, and I think, back then it was all stand-up, and guys didn't know, how to butterfly out on the knees,
right.
And so had they done that, I think there would have been a lot less goal scoring, and maybe you wouldn't see so many 200. Well, you probably would have seen a 200-point season out of Gretzky, but yeah, numbers would have been better. For sure.
I mean, even in his third year in the league, he had a .361 goals against average and an .879 save percentage, and he was 9th in Vezina Trophy voting.
Yeah, I mean the rest of the league
shows you how bad goaltending was and how high goal scoring was. I mean, think 87-88 with the Sabres. Again, I know it's with the Sabres, not the Penguins. .896 save percentage, .332 goals against average. He was 6th in the Hart Trophy voting.
Yeah, I think it was
second Vezina.
It was an era where
people
offense
looked at goalies
and forwards just they developed and they just went to a whole nother level in terms of play where goaltending wasn't catching up until the early 90s. And
I mean, in 89-90, with granted a rough Pittsburgh team, he had a .468 goals against average.
I know.
I mean, yeah, he did play in the 80s. I do think that he is maybe an overrated goaltender overall. He had a couple nice seasons with the Sabres, and I mean, maybe guys would speak differently about him from those actual teams. And I know that the gameplay was a little bit different. I mean, in fairness, in 92-93, they didn't win the cup, but Pittsburgh was very favored to win the cup in 93 as well.
They were.
They were above and beyond the favorites. I mean, he won 43 games that year in 63 attempts. So that's a nice season. I can't fault you for having him on that list. But for me, Tom Barrasso, I don't think that goalies were going to make or break you in the 80s.
No, not at all. But I will say,
or not early 90s.
Even though he's on my list, I would probably never vote for him for a Hall of Famer. So
no, he's not in the Hall of Fame.
No, he's not. But I'm just saying, I would never vote for him to go in.
Right.
So
agreed. Yeah, I mean he has 369 wins. 100%. Chris Osgood should be in there ahead of Barrasso.
Absolutely.
And I still don't think Osgood should be in there.
Well, that's another argument we can have.
Okay, my number 8's Chris Letang.
Okay, he's my number 7.
Okay, all right. Yep, pretty close together. The all-time leader in points for a defenseman as a Pittsburgh Penguin. He's got 493.
That's
they actually
correct.
have him listed as Christopher Letang, so we'll refer to him as his Christian name, Christopher Letang. I mean, not much can be said in a negative light of Chris Letang. I mean, he's had some injuries towards the end of in the last couple of years that have kind of maybe lessened his impact with the Penguins. He did get a Stanley Cup ring with the Penguins in 16, where he barely played.
Right.
2017, he was a little more of a piece of that. But I mean, hey, he's the highest scoring guy. He's played the most games as a defenseman in a Penguins uniform, and I think if they were to go back to that draft, you'd probably still be perfectly happy taking Chris Letang.
Oh yeah, when he's healthy, I mean the guy he's one of the better defensemen in the league, and I think the production and defensive side of the game speaks for it.
I mean, he was taken in the third round.
Was he really? I forget about
62
that.
overall. I actually didn't know. I thought he was one of their first round picks, but no, that was Marc-Andre. Yeah, so. Chris Letang, my number 8. So he's your number 7.
He is.
My number 7 is actually Marc-Andre Fleury.
Okay.
I saw a lot of lists. Actually, it's funny. I made this list. I just off the top of my head, because there's a few players that you're going to put on this list if you know anything about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I threw this in an order, and I went and I looked, and a lot of people had Marc-Andre Fleury at like 5, even 4 for some people. He is the all-time leader in wins. Really, I mean, for all intents and purposes, any guy that's played a really significant amount of games, he's really second only to Matt Murray in terms of save percentage, which is baffling because Matt Murray seems to have struggled so hard that it seems like his numbers should be very low.
His numbers were very good early on.
Yes.
And then they've sort of like roller coastered since. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see over time, another 400 more games for Matt Murray. Can he keep that up? So impressive enough considering 600 plus games that Marc-Andre's played.
Oh yeah, almost 700 games played for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
So good.
So I mean, you know what did surprise me is that there's only 3 goalies with more than 100 wins for the Penguins.
Really?
That did surprise me. But
yeah, that is shocking. You would think with the success they've had in the 90s and recently too, there'd be at least some semblance of.
I did notice one name that stood out to me, and that was Greg Millen. He's actually one of the CBC color guys. He does.
Oh, really?
He usually does the out west game on Hockey Night in Canada.
Oh, no
Greg
kidding.
Millen. So he played goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I feel like all those around like between 50 and 60-year-old color commentators, like Darren Pang, Greg Millen,
were
there's
goalies.
a couple other. They were goalies.
That's great.
So.
Detroit, the Fox Sports, both their color commentators, goalies.
Yep.
It's great.
Who's your number 7?
Mine was Chris Letang.
Okay.
My number
right.
6 is the Flower.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just had him kind of bumped a little bit.
A little bit.
My number 6, Paul Coffey.
Paul Coffey. Okay.
Who we already hit on. The reason I have him much higher, you had him at 9.
I had him at 9. Yeah.
I think that he was probably the, you talk about, you've got really, really talented players up front. And when you have maybe the best offensive defenseman to ever play the game, at least in terms of his era.
Definitely his era. Yeah.
I mean, you're taking Mario Lemieux and you make him better. I don't think there's too many guys that made Lemieux better. But I do think that Paul Coffey is one of them.
Well, think about it. If you stuck, let's say Brett Burns or even Erik Karlsson and stuck him with Connor McDavid, how much better would that be?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I do have him higher. I mean, he also, other outside of course, Chris Letang is the all-time leader in points, but Paul Coffey averaged 1.329 points per game. Like that's insane for a defenseman.
Yeah,
and
even for a forward. That's
we're not talking like 1983. I mean, we're talking the 90s. The early 90s. He was only there for 331 games, but and he also scored 108 goals, which is basically one out of every 3 games this defenseman's scoring. That's a pretty solid goal scoring total. So Paul Coffey, my number 6.
Okay, on to number 5 for me, Ron Francis.
Yep, that's right where I slotted him as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
almost that guy who the other 4 are just ahead of him.
Right.
Sorry.
Exactly. Sorry.
And if he played there his whole career and had the numbers that he had, he'd be higher on the list. Not that much higher though.
Yeah, maybe not even higher at all. It's kind of hard with the guys in front of him. Let's be honest.
It is real hard. I mean, shoot, that's. Ron Francis though was I mean he might be we're talking about Sidney Crosby talking about how underrated Ziggy Palffy was. And you want to talk about an underrated guy. I mean, he had almost 1,800 points.
Yeah, that's freaking impressive.
He averaged more than a point per game over the course of 1,700 games. Yeah. Even in his last year, he got traded from Carolina to Toronto. Now, in Carolina, he had 30 points in 68 games. He gets traded to Toronto. He's 10 points in 12 games.
And that wasn't a very good Toronto team either.
It was a team that was expected to do something more than what they did, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of forget about those early 2000 Toronto teams, to be quite honest.
Yeah, they went to the second round, I think. It looks like because he played 12 games, so it looks like probably the second round is where they went. So,
well, good on him.
Yeah. So Ron Francis number 5, which means your number 4 is
Malkin. Gino.
Is there any reason why you might put now? Okay, talk to me about this because let's go to your number 3. Who's your number 3?
I think you can probably guess.
Is it Jágr?
It is Jágr.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your number 2 is probably Crosby.
It is.
And your number 1's Mario Lemieux.
Obviously.
I have that exact same order, which ironically is the order in which they have points in the all-time Penguins scoring list. Lemieux has a ridiculous amount of points. I mean, the guy almost has 2 points a game. If he hadn't come back, from, when he came back when he was a little older, he was actually averaging more than 2 points a game. And then he came back and he dropped back to 1.88.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
I still remember that little family photo where you had Mario standing up and Sid sitting down and like the arm on the shoulder.
Yes.
Creepy looking. It just cracks me up every time.
Is there can Malkin jump Jágr? Can Crosby jump Lemieux?
I think Malkin can jump Jágr.
Okay.
But that depends on the production we get in his 30s. Jágr into his, mid to late 30s was still a very productive player. And I think another reason why is, for Malkin to be able to jump him, he has a lot of accolades, right? I mean, he has more Stanley Cups than Jágr did with Pittsburgh, right? Yep. Clearly.
One more.
Right. One.
So
two more. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. One more. I'm sorry.
He was there for 91
as well. 3 and 2, right. So Malkin still has more cups, but I think Malkin, a lot of people give Malkin a little bit of a, I don't want to say they kind of downgrade him because they're like, oh, he's playing behind Sid all the time, so of course he's going to have success. Well, remember when Sid was hurt for the entire year, and he came in and won in the Hart.
Yeah, he won the Hart.
Yeah, he dominated.
On the other side of it is those Pittsburgh teams, they were so good, but into the mid-90s, once they won their 2 cups, and they were favorites to win the cup a lot. Very regularly, they were favorites to win the cup. There were some damn good teams in that. In the Eastern Conference, you had to go up against the New Jersey Devils, and they got stung by them. And the New York Rangers, they got stung by them. And the Montreal Canadiens, they got stung by them earlier. I think they lost. Did they play the Montreal Canadiens?
I don't recall.
Anyways, there were some other real nice teams in the. And then you're looking at, you've got in the West, you've got Colorado. You could have had to go against Detroit,
Dallas.
There were some excellent teams.
Buffalo was amazing. You have to face Hasek all the time. Bye.
I think that in the 90s, things were much more top heavy. You didn't have a cap. So Pittsburgh was a really good team, but you had other amazing teams to go up against. Whereas now the playing field's a little more even. So Pittsburgh winning those couple cups, it was especially that 2016 team, it wasn't that great of a team. They just, they changed their style of play, and they basically changed the face of the NHL.
Hey, we can play fast? Okay, let's do that.
It was like a playoff game, and they changed the NHL. The whole entire league was changed by that team. But that team wasn't necessarily, they were excellent. It's not taken away from anything that they did, but their competition maybe not as strong as what the Penguins might have seen in the 90s when you were playing top-heavy teams.
Sure.
Just a thought in terms of who maybe Jágr's going up against for those cups. So,
well, okay.
But what does Crosby have to do to jump Lemieux? Is there anything he can do?
I don't know. I think he has to fill up his Tom Brady-esque get a ton, crap load more, championships and then blow open the point totals a little bit, because I don't know if he'll catch Mario. It's possible. He could. Given the way his career is going and still is, I think it is very possible he could collect another 500 plus points. However, I still think when you look at the amount of games played Mario did and what he was able to do, I mean, you freaking one of the stats that just blew my mind, and you rarely think about it, right? Because growing up in our era, you think about guys that do penalty killing, right? They're usually third, fourth line grinders, guys that take the shot, sacrifice the body, and
Datsuk Zetterberg killing penalties is like so foreign.
Yeah,
I mean, even when they were doing it, it was foreign, but.
Mario Lemieux leads Pittsburgh in shorthanded goals with 49. Next closest, 14.
Yeah.
The margin is ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I mean, Wayne Gretzky has the most shorthanded goals of all time. The guy killed penalties.
Yeah.
Because they weren't like, go kill the penalty. They were like, just go score.
Right, go take the puck and beat everybody else skating. And same thing, Mario Lemieux leads this team in power play goals. And I think there's a lot of just crazy statistics that, Mario is up there. And oddly enough, Yager leads his team in game-winning goals, but, whatever.
Game-winning goals is kind of random.
Yeah, it is.
You win 5-1 and you happen to score the second goal,
right.
You got a game-winning goal.
Yeah, so, and actually, Chris Kunitz is up there top 10, number 6 for game-winning goals for this team.
Go. See? Told you.
Boom.
Told you. Yeah, I mean, to me, if he's going to jump him, let's say Crosby plays 1,500 games. He plays into his 40s or something.
That's possible.
And he's played for Pittsburgh. I mean, we lost a season and a half of like prime Crosby. I mean, he probably lost out on what would be another 100, maybe 150 points at this point.
We lost
missing that time, maybe more.
We lost some time though with Mario too. Let's not forget.
Did, yes, we did. Yep, absolutely. Well, we lost a lot of time with Mario. He didn't even play 1,000 games.
Right.
But what happens if Crosby goes? Even if he doesn't win another cup, he plays another 500 games for the Penguins. He picks up another 500 points, and he's pushing Lemieux. Let's say they have the exact same amount of points at the end of their careers. And I guess if he were going to average 1.2 points per game over the course of 500, it would be more. Like he would probably only need to play about 420 more games. So obviously he'd have a lot more games played, but also played in a different era, especially early on in Crosby's career, where you're still kind of playing a little bit of clutch and grab, not much, but it's still the goal scoring was still down.
Yeah, in comparison, for sure.
But as goal scoring goes up right now, maybe Crosby has a chance to pull
maybe.
in. We'll see. It'd be interesting. But yeah, it's real tough to consider putting him above Lemieux.
It is hard.
But but the longevity is a thing. Like if he plays another 8 years for the Penguins, let's say, or like 5 or 6 or something, then he's played a lot longer for the Penguins and won more cups, and he's playing in an era where you're more exposed. So, like, yeah, people love Lemieux. Also, Lemieux's the owner. That helps him out. But I think maybe Crosby could bump him.
Yeah, he's got to really, really kick it into another level.
Yeah, well, okay. That's our Pittsburgh Penguins list. If you think we're crazy and we should have something different, hit us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Let's continue with the Minnesota Wild. And we'll go to, I think, definitely a little harder to have a just miss list because there's maybe a couple players who would be considered not even, I don't know, superstar-ish kind of players. And then it kind of drops off into, hey, how long have you played here and what kind of points did you pick up? So obviously not the same kind of history. Still some really nice players on this list. I'll start with my just missed. I have Jared Spurgeon on my just missed list.
Okay.
I think a guy who, if he continues to play for the Wild for a good period of time, I think there's a chance that he maybe moves up. For a while, I think if Nino Niederreiter hadn't been traded and he had been deployed properly by this team, I think that Nino Niederreiter could have been on this list, but he's missing it because I think ultimately the way that it ended is kind of more like, I hope you become one of the best Carolina Hurricanes of all time. Because just like in your face, I mean, just like the Islanders traded him. So,
ooh, that hurts.
And that was about it. I mean, Brent Burns popped in my mind, but he definitely didn't do anything significant for the Wild in terms of like putting up big numbers or anything. So
no,
not on my list.
All right. Well, my just missed. I've got Brian Rolston. a guy a lot of people don't ever really think about as a Minnesota Wild player.
Yeah, he kind of played there towards the end. I think he was actually taken in the expansion draft.
Was he? I can't remember, honestly. Matt Dumba, he made my just missed, just because I think this guy, again, kind of like how you rationalized with Spurgeon. I think if over the next 5, 6, 7 years, however long, he's got the talent and the ability to crack this list, no problem. And then a guy whose career ended a little bit short, who I think probably could have been a good goaltender. He showed flashes, but was constantly injured, and because of the MS. But Josh Harding,
yeah.
So
Brian Ralston wasn't taken in the expansion draft. He
Okay.
was, I believe, he was signed by the Wild after the lockout in 2004.
maybe that was it. Okay.
He did have one of the best Wild seasons with 34 goals and 79 points.
Yeah,
for Brian
pretty nice.
Ralston. So, yeah, nice little player. Okay, so who is your number 10 on this list?
Number 10. It's a guy who just cracked their top 10 in all-time scoring, which is hard to think about considering the amount of trade rumors that goes around with this guy's name. I mean, it seems like the last 5 years, every single trade deadline I hear this guy's name, but Charlie Coyle for me.
Okay. A guy who,
Yeah, a very good power forward. I think he's
on the Bruins now, so.
I know he is, but
So you're saying he was on the team. There was
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, let me just clarify.
Well, he already got traded.
Well, yes.
I don't know if you remember that part, but he was,
and he was very good for Boston
he
too.
was
in the playoffs.
very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I misspoke, but it had a lot of very good. In terms of when you look at the team around him and the lack of point producers he played with. I mean, he still managed to put up roughly 40 points a season. I mean, he had 156 point, another 40, and then a bunch of middle 35s. But this is a guy who I think I wanted more out of, and maybe the team just put him in this role where he wasn't given the opportunity to produce. I think they stuck him in like a middle 6 position. They're like, hey, go out there and prove it to us. Well, you don't have anybody to play with, so figure it out. Right, and then they bury him on the third line, and then all of a sudden Granlund, starts producing, and he's bumping up, and Zucker starts getting a little bit better, and all these guys are just moving up around him, and Minnesota's still looking at this guy like, what are you doing? We're not going to give you the opportunity because all these other guys are playing better, so figure it out. And then eventually they trade him. So
yeah, my knock on him: 91 goals in 479 games. He really didn't do much in the goal scoring.
No,
spot.
only 120 goal season,
and I as much as I liked him in the playoffs, it was for a different team, and I thought, Charlie Coyle? Nah, he's like a third line guy to me, maybe a second, borderline second. So I left him off my list. My number 10 though is a goaltender.
Ooh,
it is Nicholas Backstrom.
My number 9.
Your number 9. Okay, yeah. So he was kind of the guy before Devin Dubnyk got there, and he's the all-time leader in wins. He's got 194. And played 409 games for this organization, and was always just solid. I don't know if you'd ever look at him and say, "Yep, like that's the guy. He's unreal." I mean, he put up good numbers. He
was never one of those guys where you're like he's one of the top goaltenders in the league, but you felt safe with him back there, right? You never really worried. You're like, "Oh crap, he's gonna, is he gonna have a good season?" Right. Like constantly, I think Martin Jones right now. He's in that situation where people are like, "Crap, what kind of goaltender are we going to get next year?" You never really thought that about Nicholas Backstrom.
Yeah. Yep. Good, solid goaltender, and for a team with very little to offer from like an offensive standpoint, it's hard to ignore goaltenders at that point, because if you think especially when the Wild were first in the league, and maybe even the first 10 years or so, which Backstrom I think he started there in 2005-06, they were a hard trapping team. I mean, when they went to the conference finals, remember they played the Anaheim Ducks. I guess they were the Mighty Ducks at the time when the Ducks went to the finals against New Jersey in 2003. The Wild were a tremendous trapping team. Like it was like the Ducks were playing the New Jersey Devils that didn't have good players on their team.
Right.
So yeah, they definitely helped their goaltenders a lot in that respect too. So Nicholas Backstrom, my number 10. Who's your number 9?
Nicholas Backstrom.
Oh, yeah, you said that. My number 9 is Michael Granlund.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael Granlund's, he's the good Michael Granlund. That's
a good Michael Granlund.
That's pretty much the way I see it. I mean, he had some good years with them. I mean, he had multiple 60-point seasons, and I think in terms of this iteration of the Wild, the team that made the playoffs pretty much every year and was always eliminated in the first round by the Chicago Blackhawks. I think that he was an important part of that team. He had some good success regular season wise. In the playoffs, he had a couple of okay years in the playoffs, but definitely nothing to write home about. Not a great playoff guy, but the Minnesota Wild really haven't done much in the playoffs since 2003. So it's hard to make that a comparable on the list. But I think Michael Granlund, he's 6th all time in Wild scoring, so makes sense to have him on there.
Okay, I respect it. All right, for my number, what am I on? 8. Number 8, a guy who is 8th all-time in scoring, Jared Spurgeon.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a guy who I think is just now getting into his prime. Unfortunately, it's when he turns 29 now, which I think Minnesota fans maybe had hoped it would have been a few years earlier. But yeah, I think now he's proven himself. He can be a top pairing guy. I think when Suter was out for most of last year, he stepped in, filled the role, and he and Matt Dumba look like they're going to be.
Well, yeah. So Dumba's good.
Yeah.
This is Dumba.
Well, I know that, but.
And he also gets to play with Ryan Suter.
Well, I know that never hurts either. But I think he holds his own ground. I think he's still a quality D man. I would be happy to have him, especially as a Wings fan. I think it'd be fantastic.
I think he's a good number 3 who can slot up in the lineup when he plays with good players. Which Minnesota does have a nice defensive core.
They do. They have some nice players back there.
I can't fault you for. I mean, the fact that a defenseman is in their top 10 of scoring and he's there. He's just.
He is averaging 24 minutes a night, which is,
also important.
Pretty good.
Yeah. My number 8 is number 5 all-time in scoring for the Wild, a guy who was there for their conference final trip, Andrew Brunette.
Okay.
321 points in 489 games. I remember Andrew Brunette when he was on the Wild. This memory is a little faint because it's 16 years old is my memory, and I remember him though going there and being given more defensive responsibility because they played the trap and he really had to buy into this system and he was coming from the Atlanta Thrashers. He had a couple good seasons and he comes to the Minnesota Wild. And he actually played for the Wild twice. He was on the Wild from 2001 to 2004, and then he left for Colorado. He had his best season with the Avalanche, but then he comes back to the Minnesota Wild for another 3 years. And I just think one of those guys that is just always solid. You could count on him for 20 goals pretty much every year. The years where he didn't get 20 goals, pretty darn close, but always put up good numbers. But more importantly was consistently given the role to shut down players. I mean, he was a winger, but he was kind of that a little more defensive type of winger. So
yeah,
and
poor
on
man's
a team
Mark Stone.
that in the best playoff year of this team's existence, he was a determining factor in helping this team get there. And he had 13 points in 18 games, and for a team that wasn't scoring many goals. That's pretty good. I think that Anaheim, in that series, I think every game was 1-0, 2-1.
Wow.
I'll have to go look that up.
Yeah, I don't remember that series at all. To be quite honest, I don't remember Brunette that much either. That's why he didn't make my list.
All right.
All right, moving on to my number 7, Michael Granlund. You talked about him a little bit, and I'm going to talk about him now.
All right.
So
do it up.
Yeah, Granlund, unfortunately, will not be playing for the Wild anytime soon. He's hanging out in Nashville right now. Can't really blame him. That's going to be pretty sweet setup for him. I don't know how long he'll hang out there though. They got a lot of
holy balls. They scored 1 goal in 4 games. It was 1-0, 2-0, 4-0, 2-1.
Wow, reminiscence of the New York Islanders from last season. All right.
Holy smokes! They lost 1-0 in double overtime in Game 1, and they decided to make a goaltending switch.
What? No, Fernandez had to get hurt.
No, I don't think he did.
Really? Oh, man.
Don't think he did.
That would be the stupidest thing ever.
Unbelievable.
Stupidest thing.
Pretty crazy.
I'm going to move on from this because it's only going to make me mad.
Anyways.
Yeah, Granlund, he's a guy who, slowly but surely became, I think, a player that Minnesota expected him to. Back in 16-17, putting up 70 points in 81 games. However, he followed it up with another 67-point season, but just slowly didn't really get any better, right? It almost seemed like he plateaued, and I think that's what maybe prompted Minnesota to move him. Although I don't really understand why, because Koivu's, going downhill. He's getting older, and so, who's your number one center at this point? But that's another discussion. So they decided to move him, and Granlund, smartly can play on the wing, can play center. He can play anywhere in your lineup, and I think he's still a quality top six forward. So Nashville's got a nice little piece there. We'll see what they do. But for me, I think during his tenure, he was very productive for a team that never really was known for scoring goals.
All right. My number 7 is Matt Dumba.
Okay.
Who, could be. I think he will be higher on this list when all is said and done. I didn't have him higher on my list because I think that the players ahead of him have established themselves. They've been there for a while, or they were there for a while. And I think in 3 years, we'll say, I'd say already he's the best defenseman to ever play for the Minnesota Wild. I think he's better than Ryan Suter.
Maybe.
I think he's better than Ryan Suter.
In 4 years, we can say that.
Right now, he's better than Ryan Suter. I will take Matt Dumba right now. Right now on my Stanley Cup attempt over Ryan Suter. Right now.
I could flip a coin, but
I don't think there's...
if we're talking a healthy Ryan Suter...
Healthy Ryan Suter versus a healthy...
I don't know. I think that the IQ, I think Ryan Suter's just so much better at it, and he's just a better shutdown guy. Now, Doomby will give the nod in terms of offensiveness, too. I think he's got a little bit more foot speed. He can move the puck just as well, I think, as Ryan Suter can now. But, yeah, I don't know. That's tough. Maybe in a couple of years, I'll definitely agree with you.
Are we talking Ryan Suter at 25? I'm going to take Ryan
I'm talking
Suter,
right now.
Yeah, right now
I still like Suter.
Okay.
He's definitely not top 10.
Well, don't worry. Suter will appear higher on my list.
I know.
But Dumba is my number 7.
Okay. Moving on. My number 6, Pierre-Marc Bouchard.
Okay. Yeah.
Number 3 all-time scoring leader for this team, which is just crazy to think. Just a little under 350 points, and that's number 3 on your all-time. But again, this team's only been around since 2000, so...
Yeah, he played for them from 2002 until 2013, and his best season was 63 points. Never put up more than 20 goals. He did that once. So, that was... Yes, longevity-wise. He's been there. Third or fourth most games, right?
He's probably up there a little bit higher.
Up there.
Honestly.
He's fourth all-time in games played.
All right, there you go. Yeah, he retired, just stopped playing pretty quick, I think. Did he go overseas?
He ended up going to the Islanders, and then he played in the AHL, actually.
Yeah, that's what it was. Okay.
For a year. And yes, he did go overseas. He went to EV Zug. I don't know what NLA. I don't know what league that is.
I think that's a Swedish elite league.
Okay.
It's one of those Swedish leagues.
Liga or something, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? He was a quality guy. He was never like the best guy on the team at any point, but
I think they thought he'd be a lot better.
Absolutely.
8th overall pick.
Yeah, I definitely think they expected him to be better, and I still would be okay with what I got at 8 overall. Hell, I'm sure there were probably a few more other picks around that time that were probably pretty bad. I want to look that up.
Yeah, there really were very few players to come later. That was the Rick Nash year.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, I guess they could. They had their shot at. In fairness, the Panthers took at number 9 Peter Tatacek, who played 3 games in the NHL and had no points. Eric Nystrom, Keith Ballard, not a bad player. Alexander Semin for the Caps, and then really you're looking for the next best guy. It was Alex Steen at 24.
Yeah, you can go one spot down. You got a guy who just retired today, signed a 1-day contract. Cam Ward retiring with the Hurricanes.
Yes, I did see that. So, yeah, I think that Duncan Keith at 54. Which, in fairness, everyone missed on him twice.
Yeah, twice.
So, that's not necessarily their fault. But
but I think the production you got out of a guy, even with a first-round pick, you're still happy with. And granted, you're probably right. They wanted more out of this guy, and, maybe everybody else did too. But unfortunately, just didn't really pan out. And I think tail end of his career, we kind of, saw it going down, and that's when you see trades and AHL stuff going on. So
here's a random thing for it. Okay, 2002, the Red Wings drafted someone that is still on the Red Wings. Who is it?
Yeah, I know. He was the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant. I hate that fact.
Jonathan Ericsson.
This is going to be his last season thing, if he even gets to play at all, because
I can't believe they didn't buy. Well, the only reason they didn't buy him out was because they're not going to be that good.
No, exactly. It's wasted money that's going to burn your cap years a couple years from now. So let him play out his last year. This year, if he gets to play at all, I mean, maybe he might see 20, 30 years.
Send him to Grand Rapids.
Yeah, 20 or 30 games.
Save the $900,000 in cap space. So my number 6 is Eric Stahl.
Wow. Okay.
Did he make your list?
He didn't make my list. I thought about putting him on my list, but I mean, it is funny. He is actually up there, I think, number 4 or 5 in terms of points per game.
He's number 4 in points per game, yes.
Yeah, he's been very productive since he got there, and I don't think the Wild have ever had, I guess, I don't want to say a center with his ability, but a center who has had the type of production he's had in his career.
Sure.
So, like Mikko Koivu, while he's probably a better center for the Wild in terms of career, never really had that offensive output that Eric Stahl had at any point in his career. So
yeah, I'm pretty confident that he had. He has the best season for goals for a while, like that 42 goal season.
I believe
Gabrick scored 42 goals twice for the Wild, but that ties the best season in terms of goals. Yeah, I think that his 3 years there has warranted him being up here this high, because I think he'll probably go do it again. He's had this resurgence. You know, they haven't had any luck in the playoffs, and that's just kind of the rest of the team. I mean, obviously that franchise is in disarray.
Yeah.
If there is one franchise that I think maybe 3 years ago that you'd go, who's in like pretty good shape? Like who could do some things? You say, well, the Wild would be in there. Like they're going to be underrated. Like they've got some good guys, and maybe Eric Stahl can rejuvenate his career.
They sneakily would get in the playoffs every year.
Yeah, and then Paul Fenton blew it up. Maybe the worst trade. Like I can't think of very many worse trades than that Nino Niederreiter for Victor Rask. Did you hear that the Hurricanes in this offseason right now, we're planning on buying him out right now?
Eric Stahl.
No, they were planning on buying out Victor Rask.
Oh.
And instead, Paul Fenton called the Hurricanes and said, "Hey, we're interested in Victor Rask. Would you want Nino Niederreiter?" And they said, "Yeah."
Yeah, why would you
Paul
not
Fenton
say?
was apparently walking around bragging about the fact that he made a pure hockey trade.
A 1-for-1. Oh, my gosh.
And people were like, you should have gotten...
Guy who never should have been a GM.
Dude, terrible.
Should have never. I mean, granted,
Have
Ryan...
you heard that whole story?
No, I haven't. I mean,
gosh,
the Donato trade looks okay so far, but...
Yeah. That one looks
Whether
okay.
it'll pan out long term, you don't really know. But, I mean, now you don't... You have a team now that really... Eric Stahl's going to be your number 1 center, basically, next year.
Someone wrote this like super intense, hard-hitting piece on like basically all these sources from within the organization that said Paul Fenton was awful, like treated people terribly. He came in, hired his son as head of scouting, like all these things, like the things that you're like, you know, I mean, you don't go in and he fired all these different people and moved people around, and yeah, it was just a bad situation. But
my goodness.
So yes, our number 5. Is that where
we're at 5. Yeah,
we're at number 5.
I'll take the lead on this one. Second all time in wins, and I think probably the best goaltender in terms of talent this team's ever had.
Absolutely,
Devin Dubnyk.
He's also my number 5.
All right.
Yep.
Beautiful. Yeah, sitting only 29 wins behind Nicholas Backstrom for all time. And I do think he will likely pass it. Well, I can't say that for certain because he got 31 wins last year, and I think the rest of Central's getting much better around him, and the Wild have not done anything to improve, so can't say for certain he will actually pass that this year. So maybe, but
it's possible.
It's possible, but there's no denying the talent, and I think if the Wild have any shot at making the playoffs for being a bubble team, it's going to be because of Devin Dubnyk is going to steal a bunch of games.
Yep. Yeah, he's. He had the 1 year where he came to Minnesota late in the year, 39 games, and he won 27 of them, and was fourth in Hart voting. He won the Masterton Trophy because remember he was on Edmonton, and he was supposed to be a really good goaltender, and never was good for Edmonton. I wonder why.
That's where players go to die.
That's crazy. Boy, Jesse Pojärvi, you should just stay in Finland until they trade you or something.
I would.
Well, okay, so both our number 4 is Devin Dubnyk. My number 5. Sorry,
yeah,
same number 5. My number 4 is the aforementioned Ryan Suter.
Okay,
probably at this point
I have him at number 3.
Is the best defenseman to have played for this organization. So, yeah, I mean, he's the highest scoring defenseman to play for the organization. He's 7th all time in scoring, and if he can regain his health back and like actually come back, be healthy, not get injured, I think this team, even though it looks like they're down and out, they did have a lot of pretty serious injuries last year. Like Matt Dumba, Ryan Suter, your top 2 defensemen are out. What team can sustain that?
Sure. So that's completely understandable.
So yeah, but Ryan Suter, what he can do in terms of like the amount of minutes played is outrageous.
Yeah, no one touches that in the league every year. And I don't know how he does it too, because he doesn't have to be quick on his feet. So right, you kind of save a little bit of energy doing that. He's just so smart in every other area. Yeah. He just keeps himself fresh.
And he'll be in Minnesota until 2050.
41 or something. Oh my God. Same with the other guy who's number 4 on my list, Zach Parise.
We just had him flipped.
We did.
Parise at number 3.
Yeah, I don't know. Both these guys coming in there, right? I remember as a Wings fan, right? I know Ken Holland was very big on trying to get both these guys in here in Detroit. Yep. He was willing to give them I even think at one point he offered Zach Parise, or no, it was Ryan Suter, more money. I think he was going to offer him like $10 million a season.
Good thing he didn't.
Good thing he didn't.
Although not necessarily, because it's not like it made a big difference.
No, not at all. But yeah, I would say good thing he didn't for either one of these guys, because the Wings are already in cap hell as it is. Let alone, well, then again we wouldn't have Abdelkader or Helm signed to these deals either if he had wasted that money.
Have been able to.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, Parise's health has been a big question. Obviously, same as Suter's, and I think. When I look at these two guys, and I kind of have to decide, like, which one would I rather have on the ice in a crucial time, overtime or 3-on-3 situation where you got to score that next goal, I would take Ryan Suter all day long over Zach Parise.
Okay.
At this point, anyways.
Right.
So
that's fair. Maybe more of an impact because of how much he plays. That's
right.
Fair. I think that when Parise came in, I think largely he's been a disappointment.
Considering the hype, I think, and the money they spent, and everything.
The year before he left New Jersey went to the Stanley Cup Final. Remember they played the LA Kings, and he was unreal in that. Like that, even I remember watching New Jersey Devils games down the stretch, and he was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, granted, he only put up 15 points in those 24 games, but just his impact on the ice was so large.
Yeah,
like he and Kovalchuk
in the playoffs.
Yeah. For the Devils. Yeah, he and Kovalchuk had the points, but both of them, just anytime they're on the ice, they made a difference. Like it wasn't a question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, because there's not other players that have played for this team, Zach Parise in our top 5.
All right.
Number 2 is
Koivu.
Mikko Koivu. Okay.
Yeah, I have him at number 2.
You have Marian Gaborik at number 1?
I do.
All right. I actually have them flipped.
Okay. That's fair.
I know that Gaborik has put up far more goals, almost double the amount of goals in terms of goals per game. Actually, more than double, and the points per game are relatively close. I just think a guy that captained this team for so long and has been there, essentially. I mean, he is the Minnesota Wild in some respects. He really embodies them. He's mediocre, just good enough. And plays good defensive hockey. And there's the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, I mean, I won't disagree with you there. When you do think of Minnesota, right, he is one of those guys that you think about. And I think my fondest memory of Gaborik as a Wild player was when he was going in on a breakaway head down, and Dominik Hasek came out and basically just like slid feet first into him. And you see Gaborik just do a 360 flip in the air and gets a pen. And technically, I don't think that should have been a penalty, but it was so funny. And that's my fondest memory of Gaborik as a Wild player. But to me, the offensive production that he had he not, maybe went to New York and stayed around, maybe Minnesota would have had a little bit more success, but unfortunately, no.
Yeah, and he had some injury problems too. Like 08-09, he only played 17 games. So yeah, some of his production slowed by some injuries. He played 48 games in 06-07, 65 in 05-06, 65 in 03-04. So he never played a full season for the Minnesota Wild, other than 181
Which technically isn't a full season.
Technically not.
Technically.
I'll give it to him, though. Maybe he had an itchy bum hole or something. Is that a reason to miss a game?
Maybe.
It could be. Depends on how itchy it is. Anyways, holy
getting off the rail real quick.
That's going. Well, that's our list. There you go. Minnesota Wild. Koivu 1-2. Gabrick, who should be there? Tell us. Tell us what you think.
Fight us. Let's go.
I think because we talked about them on the show, this particular episode, we have talked about them before on the show, but I think we should do the Carolina Hurricanes next.
Okay.
That's my pick for one of the teams that we do next.
Okay.
And
I'll go west in a team that maybe has a little relationship with Minnesota, and we'll do Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll do some Dallas/Minnesota North Stars, Dallas Stars action, along with the Carolina Hurricanes. And with that, we will bid you a farewell, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Hit us up on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and make sure you hit the subscribe button, share it with people. We appreciate you always sharing episodes with friends, and that's how we grow our show. That's how we get better, and looking forward to almost here, regular season. And we got some new branding coming out.
We do.
So look for that. It'll be here before you know it for the start of the season. It won't be this totally garbage graphic for the podcast that I made.
I paid somebody.
Yes, yeah, you did.
And not on Fiverr either.
Yes, that's when you know it'll be good. So, all right, guys, we'll talk to you soon.